Hello, hello. Welcome to this episode of the Legal Page podcast. Today we have not one, but two very special guests. You're listening to the Legal Page podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. Josh and Kariss Farris are a husband and wife wedding and corporate photography team who capture special moments all across the country and all across the world. They have turned their passion into their profession. They love capturing passionate couples from engagements to their wedding day and have found no greater joy than being a part of a union in a way that freezes time. These two are based out of Dallas, Texas, and travel all over to photograph their clients. Now, Josh used to be a mechanical engineer and even worked for NASA making toilets for the space station, which we will talk about more in this episode, so stay tuned. And Kariss plays the creative who styles the photos and poses the clients and creates the most amazing imagery possible. Seriously, if you haven't checked them out, they are PharrisPhotos.com, and I am just obsessed with them. And I loved meeting them at the Past Styled Shoots Across America conference. We really hit it off, and I just asked them to be on the podcast because I knew they would be so valuable as a duo. They've got all kinds of good information about how to run a successful business as a husband and wife team. So let's get to it.
Hello, Legal Pagers. Thanks so much for tuning in today to this episode. I am literally just so excited to welcome my very first dynamic duo to the Legal Page podcast, the Farrises. Hello, Kariss and Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
They are a husband and wife team, and I met them at the Styled Shoots Across America conference this year. We sat together at dinner, and we also just sat together pretty much the entire conference and chit-chatted all about photography and business and life, and really just got to know one another. I love them. I think they are doing big things right now. I love that they care for their family and each other and their marriage and their business all in one. So I couldn't wait to have them on the podcast. You guys, I introduced you at the beginning of this episode, but I would love it if you could introduce yourself to everyone tuning in today. Tell them what you do and why you do it.
All right, Josh, you go first.
Oh, no problem. Okay, yeah. So Kariss and I are a husband and wife team who absolutely loves being a part of couples' lives, being their wedding photographers, and giving them something that they can cherish forever. So we started this journey starting in college at Baylor University almost 10 years ago. Has it been almost that long ago, Kariss? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But from there, we yeah. I know. Oh my gosh. But anyways, yeah. But from there, we've been able to build relationships with a lot of couples, and just with the purpose of impacting marriages and changing the lives of other creators through education as well as entrepreneurship.
I love it. Kariss, anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely something to add. We started doing it together, like Josh said, in college, and just really fell in love with the team aspect of it. And I think that for us as a married couple, it's just a blessing to be able to invest in other, marriages as they are coming. So from engagements to, the actual wedding day, we just love as a couple being able to pour into other couples' lives at that early stage. And really just photography gives us the way to both be creative and then to also do what is another one of our passions, which is investing in other couples. So that's, we're, like Josh said, we're married. We've been married for about 5 years, and we have 2 babies. And so, like I said before, we just really enjoy the family aspect and the marriage aspect of what we do, and blessing other photographers as well as couples who are about to be married.
I love your guys' philosophy on your photography business. Now, before you got into photography, and I think you guys are both full-time photographers now together as a duo. Where were you at, before the full-time photography happened?
So for me, I was, what was I doing? I was working for family. Just kind of I worked for an uncle of mine who had his own business, and I was really just doing like reception work, and I only did that for about 6 months after college until I got pregnant with our first daughter. And I think we had been married for like 7 months at that point, so it was like really quick, really surprising. I was like, oh shoot, like I'm pregnant. Josh is gonna kill me, but it all turned out great. But I think I was 6 months into working just for a family member. And when I got pregnant, Josh was like, you know what, like just come on home. You can be full-time photography, because at that time I was working, but I was also working on editing at the same time I was working at my job. And it had just gotten to a point where it was really overwhelming, just trying to do both. And so when I got pregnant, it was just a really good, like, all right, like, let's just, start from scratch here with me being full-time. And so I went full-time. I think it was 2014. I went full-time after working like for 6 months after college. But Josh?
Yeah. So after I graduated, I went on to work as a mechanical engineer for NASA. And so,
no big deal or anything. Casual.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And then a few years after that, I went on into the oil and gas industry as a project engineer. So I had a lot of engineering, I guess, experience, as well as the corporate side and managing projects. So, which I'm grateful for today, as we're able to grow our business. I'm able to use all of those things to help us do that efficiently.
What a phenomenal background, Josh. It's how awesome for you guys to be able to like see this bigger picture while you guys are building your family on what you want your day-to-day life to look like as you start adding family members in. And you guys are so family oriented. And so being able to continue on with a family business by doing it together and leaving everything else behind, I guess, is the best way to put that. Josh, I'm interested, how have you found that like this very, specific engineering background, I would say like, more scientific background has helped you with more of a, creative business that you guys have built?
I'm all about systems and processes. And it's funny because engineering is really a science and an art, especially in design, mechanical design, which is what I was doing. More specifically, I was designing the toilet for the space station. And so I was an intergalactic plumber, if you will. So that takes some science and that takes some art. You got to figure out basically how not to let, crap hit the fan, So I did that on the engineering side, and I'm doing that now on the business side. So, and I'm able to keep everything at bay by using systems and processes. So by learning how to basically solve problems on the engineering side, I'm able to just translate those skills and to the business side, right? So, hey, you don't have clients? Well, let's figure that out. There's a system to getting clients. There's a system to growing your business. And if we can just find those systems, optimize them, implement them into your business, that's how we're able to grow. So that's just what I do here. And yeah, and Kariss keeps me busy because she does great work.
The best analogy I probably will ever hear on a podcast is that.
There you go.
Like you're building space station toilets and not letting crap hit the fan.
There you go.
Literally, and then figuratively in your business. Another follow-up that I have for both of you is when you guys kind of started out, implementing the systems, really figuring that out. Where were you like at when that all started? Like how many clients did you have on board versus how many are you taking on board now, and being able to like expand that client experience as a whole because your systems are in place?
I will say, even from the very beginning, when Josh was still at work and I was kind of at home working full time, he was like, here's the spreadsheet, fill this out. Like, and at the time, we may have done Our first year, maybe like 15 weddings, like maybe when I was full time, 10 to 15. And even then with like that small number, at least, looking back, Josh was very much so like, you need a system for this, like fill out this spreadsheet. Like, what is the system for following up with clients? What is the system with keeping up with clients? Like, fill out this spreadsheet. And this was before we had like Agree. I don't even know if Agree or, any of those software systems, they may have been out at that time, but we didn't have them. And so he pretty much created like his own, system for us specifically from scratch at the point that we started. So from the very beginning, I think just because of who he is, he had those things, available. And if he didn't have it, he would create it. And so for us, it was since the very beginning that we kind of put in systems and processes. And I honestly think that's really the reason why we, are successful and have been successful. Because I know if it was up to me, like this business would have crashed and burned. Like that is not my strong suit whatsoever. I am not good on my own at creating those systems and processes. I'm really good at creating the images and the beautiful part and the editing and all of that. But honestly, we had to have that. And like I said, we started off with that just because of who he is.
One of the best points to drive home, Kariss, that you were just talking about time and time again there was that you guys did this even though, you were smaller scale at the beginning, I guess, is where most photographers start out. And I think that's kind of a problem that we see in our industry is that systemizing doesn't happen till later on, when you can do it at the very beginning, get those systems in place, and then you're ready to scale and add on more clients and add on more things like education is what you guys have been adding on. It's really important. And I hope for all of you photographers and creatives listening into the podcast today, if you have one takeaway, it's like, get your systems and workflow in place now. And we could go on and on about that topic. But one of the things that I think is a good transition into your guys' teamwork is how, what are your systems and how do you guys work as a team together? I would love for you guys to explain more about, being a duo in the industry as a husband and wife and where your teamwork really thrives. So if you guys wouldn't mind starting out kind of talking about how that system works with photography and behind the scenes with your photography business.
Yeah, I'll kind of explain a little bit about how we kind of set it up, right? So when it comes down to working as a team, what you definitely have to have is not only communication, but you have to have some defined roles, right? Just the way that me and Kariss operate, even in our marriage, I take on the responsibility of everything. If something goes wrong, I may not be at fault, but I'm responsible for fixing that. If something goes right, it was because Kariss did it. But anyway, in the business, I take responsibility for if anything goes wrong. So that means at the end of the day, I'm responsible. So we have to define those roles of what we do. I take responsibility, but that doesn't mean that I do everything, right? Kariss handles a ton when it comes to the wedding. She pretty much handles the whole wedding operation. But so what that looks like for us is we have listed out, who's responsible for everything when it comes down to the wedding, who's responsible for packing the bag, who's responsible for making sure the gear's charged, who's responsible for making sure the pictures get back and all of that, so it's very, just like when it comes to having a budget, making sure everything is written out, it's important to make sure all of the responsibilities are written out. And whenever we come across a new role or task, we make sure to literally document that task, that new thing that's in the business and who's responsible for it, and the steps of achieving or making sure that task gets done. So that was one of the first things. Once we had that in line or in place, we were always able to fall back on who should do it. Because to be honest, I remember at the beginning, a lot of our arguments or things were about like, no, you should have done that. No, you said you were going to do that. And it was really a huge waste of time and effort when we just should have, defined the role, who's responsible for that. Right. So that was one of them.
Yeah, so important, right? Because when you're working as a husband and wife team, as a partnership team, if you're working with family members, things can get a lot stickier than if you're just working, with a business partner that's outside of your, familial circle.
Absolutely.
Because there's more emotions involved. And especially with a husband and wife, like you guys have to keep, a little bit more church and state with like business and personal life separate. And so I love the idea.
Such thing.
Yeah, there's no such thing.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, I'll remember that if I ever bring Marco into my business.
There you go.
That's not a good idea.
Marriage.
Okay, no church and state, no business and personal. Got it. It's all blended together. There's no way to separate the two. But the reality is you guys were able to like define the roles early on. So if you guys, anyone listening is like thinking about, I'm working with my sister, or, I'm thinking of bringing my, brother on to like do some back end work. Even if you're not like collaborating as a husband and wife team, as Kariss and Josh have been talking about, like the most important thing that Josh said is like, don't start until you've defined the roles, because it's so vital to ensure that you don't have a miscommunication later on where somebody, like you guys said, it's like constant fighting, like, well, who was supposed to do this? I didn't know I was supposed to do this. So listing that out, do you guys have like any specific suggestions on how people can list those out and make those defined roles really like tangible and visible for like, team members?
Yeah. I mean, I would say you need to figure out what you're good at. So, I'm not sitting here trying to come up with systems and processes. That is clearly not what I'm good at, and Josh isn't posing, he's not the leader in posing brides and grooms on the wedding day. He can do it, but I'm just really good at it. So,
Absolutely.
First, I think the thing is you need to identify your strengths and play to that. So, if you're going into it, either with a like a spouse or, boyfriend or girlfriend, figure out what you're good at, define the roles. Even if you're going into it with a friend, or if you're having somebody come and work for you, like if it is a professional relationship, figure out what you're good at so you can figure out what to delegate to them. To me, I think that is really the first step in defining the roles, is figure out what, the 2 people or 3 people or however many are going to be working together, figure out what their strengths are, and then figure out, okay, what area can we each go into that will best benefit the business and best benefit each one of our strengths?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Gotcha. No, I mean, that makes sense. Like start there, start with what you guys are good at, and then kind of extrapolate down. And I would think of it more as like a web, right? So like, what is this big concept that you're super, super good at? Kariss is like posing, all things photography. Josh is more like back-end systems, workflow, getting all of the nitty-gritty accomplished and all of the T's crossed and I's dotted that need to happen in a business. And then you guys are able to kind of web out whatever those tiny roles are from there. And the one thing I would always say that you guys probably can elaborate on this more is obviously you define the roles at the beginning of like a duo or a teamwork type of situation when you're going into business together. But things happen, right? Like roles come up that you didn't expect. How do you guys deal with those type of situations?
As the man, as her husband, as I take responsibility for it, and we have to figure it out. Me
lots
and Kariss.
Lots of communication.
Yeah, definitely lots of communication. But we take on this just get it done mentality. Because we've been doing this long enough, we've experienced and we know the results of what happens if we just sit there and go back and forth trying to place blame on one another, right? So through all of that, we've acquired an ownership mentality. We're trying to put away the victim mentality and just get it done. So through that comes a lot of communication, like Kariss said. And then on top of that, placing the systems and processes in place so it should not happen again.
Perfect. Yeah. And that totally makes sense, right? Because I think what ultimately happens is when you add a family member in, or you are a partnership team, or you decide, expand, when it happens, you always have to think about responsibility and who's taking responsibility for what. And I love that you guys just have that role defined in terms of like, if something were to happen, like who's going to take blame for it first. It sounds like it's Josh, which is pretty sweet. I agree.
It is pretty sweet.
Like, can you teach Marco how to do this? No, I'm kidding. He's pretty great too. But oftentimes, I was just listening into this other podcast episode actually yesterday. It was on Stacey Toshel's podcast. I think it's called Foot Traffic now. And she was talking with her sister, and they work together in a team environment. Her sister now like runs all these brick and mortar dance studios that she has, and she's the general manager. And they had something very similar to what you guys are talking about, which is like at the beginning, there was situations where people should have taken responsibility for their actions, and instead it got like a little more, like sticky and like volatile when it didn't need to be. And now that they figured out that taking responsibility to start actually moves the needle forward more and has what you like to call, Josh, that get it done mentality. If everyone in the business relationship has that, then the responsibility is going to be, someone's going to take ownership for whatever occurred. And then you can move on quicker. And like you said, put systems in place so it doesn't happen again. So I love that you just said that. And I was like, yes, totally true. And I just heard this from like a sister team. So really, really true for any type of duo working together.
Well, something that Kariss and I have learned, I mean, like we said, first of all, not much separation of, business and personal. This is our lifestyle, but we've learned in our marriage, which has translated to our business as well, is, communicating on the front end, be proactive rather than reactive. And so a lot of the times if you're like something that we try to do, and a lot of businesses do, but it takes discipline to continue to do, is, have regular meetings where we sit down and treat it like a formal business meeting, because we're in such close proximity to each other all the time. It's so easy to have these casual conversations about business, but even though they could be really important things, they're taken lightly, so we try to be proactive. And like I said, with the business as well as in our marriage, by having these meetings where we communicate these things.
Yeah. And just being able to set aside that time is so key. That's a little nugget that people should take away from this episode, is if you are working as a team in whether it's a duo, whether you've just got all these team members on board, if you don't set aside that time just to like sit and talk about the business versus constantly doing like task to task to task and like talking about it here and there, I think those meetings are vital to you becoming a more successful business. So I love that you guys do that too.
Absolutely.
Kariss, I'd be interested to hear you kind of talk about and wrap up here on teamwork. I know you guys have a similar purpose and mission, and how has that really, grown your business to where it is now?
Definitely. Well, being on the same page, pun intended.
I've never gotten that before in my entire life.
What? Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Well, anyway, being on the same page, it's just really important for us. And I think, being married definitely keeps us on the same page. But like Josh was saying, like having meetings, it keeps us on that, trajectory. And so when it comes to, our goals and all of that, I think that we're constantly talking about the goal. Or if there's a new goal that comes into play, like we may be in the same house, but like Josh will text it to me like, hey, I just had an idea. This is the route that, I think, we should continue on, or, I think we need to course correct and maybe go this way. So there's constant communication just about the purpose and the goal that we have and that we're in. And really, I kind of touched on it in the beginning, but it's changing the lot. It's impacting marriages, that we have the blessing of being able to touch just through photography, changing and helping and all of that in the direction that they're going in just through photography. And so there's a lot of ways that we can reach that goal and that purpose and all of that. But we really, I think it all goes back to the two of defining the roles that we have to achieve that greater goal and that greater purpose, and staying in communication so that we are constantly on the same page with that.
Love it. The takeaways here, everyone. Similar purpose and mission. I think I'm going to put that first, even though we kind of wrapped up with it, because it's kind of this like all-encompassing bubble that should surround your entire business. And like every decision you make should always be towards that end goal. So similar
Absolutely.
purpose and mission, and then you define the roles within that business. And that's what you guys have done. And then, of course, like intermingling between everything is the best communication possible that you guys have been able to really nail down as a husband and wife team. The last question that I have for you before we move on is a little bit more about communication. How have you guys been able to communicate effectively, or like, do you guys have any tips and tricks for people regarding communication with spouses or with partners? Anyone listening?
I do.
Boy, do we. Boy, do we. Go ahead, Chris.
In terms of business, we don't need like a therapy session. I mean,
right. No, but
phenomenal marriage counselors. But
no, I really do think that being in business and in marriage has helped us be better business owners. And I say that because something that we do in marriage that has helped us in the business is in marriage every Sunday night, we sit down and we have a meeting about the week. Like, and it can be anything from the kids to, just what's going on, with our business. But on the same, playing field, we have to do that with the business as well. We have meetings. We have a meeting every week about what is going on with the business. And at this point, it's not just Josh and I. We have pretty much 2 full-time workers who help us, do all of the other things that we have going on with the business. And so, we're definitely meeting about our roles and responsibilities in the week that's coming, but also, okay, what are we delegating out to them? What are their roles and responsibilities? So, we're kind of talking about, I know right now, people who may be in a team or working with a partner or a spouse or a friend or, a colleague or whatever that may be. But as your business grows, it may not just be 2, it may turn to 3 and then 4, which is what we're dealing with right now. And so, because of that, it's the same as in marriage as it is in our business. We have to have those weekly meetings. About the shoots that are coming up, what's expected from those shoots, what are our clients needing right now. And so in marriage, it's almost the same as in business. And that's why I said it's helped us so much being married, is because of things that we have to implement in marriage, we found also work really well in business.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I'm not married yet. I've been engaged for a while, and Marco and I have been together for a very long time, like a decade. And
Yeah.
I've learned too that, it really helps. He's not a part of the business per se, but it's really helpful to lean on him and ask him questions, because I've learned that partnership communication really transfers well into business communication.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, yeah. Just lastly, I would say, for those who may not be communication savvy, i.e. me or other men, don't view it as you were about to say a therapy session. Oh, here we go. We got to communicate, we got to sit here and talk all day. But really, something that helped me was to see it more so as an investment. Everybody, I got to see it as, whenever I'm communicating with Kariss or a team member, that person is somebody who wants to propel us to the mission, right? So it's an investment. It's in my favor to talk to that person and be as clear as possible of where I'm trying to go, because that person is there to not only help me, but help us all get to where we're going, right? So being disciplined and having the meetings along with having the right outlook definitely has helped us and helped us not only keep going and be positive about it, but helped us grow our business and have a better marriage as well.
I love it. And I have 80 million follow-up here. In terms of in-person communication versus texting, digital, online, whether it's, Slack or emailing, how have you guys found that the communication has probably been better for you as a duo team, because you're able to do it more one-on-one in person?
So can you ask? Oh, I was just. No, I was just. Can you ask that again? I could.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you guys have the ability to be able to communicate in person a lot, how have you felt that has been more beneficial than people who are, working more in email, more in texting, or if a bad situation comes up or, something happens, do you guys make it a point to sit down in person versus obviously texting about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, you have to pick and choose. So there are some things that I know need to be reserved for our weekly meetings. So like, big conversations about maybe like, I don't know, I'm just making up something like pricing. Like if I say, I think we need to look at our pricing again, like that's not, a quick email conversation. Like that's our weekly meeting. We need to discuss that then. But if it's a quick question about a client, like I'll shoot a text or an email or anything like that. And I think our team members are kind of the same way. With, if it's because with our team members, we also train them, and it's almost like a mentorship thing, but they do work for us as well. And so because of that, they know that there are questions they have to reserve for, a weekly meeting versus, let me just shoot her this quick, email about a client. Does that make sense?
No,
so I think you definitely have to be wise. Because I'll be honest, like we had, one of the girls who works for us, she's amazing and she's an aspiring photographer. And a few times she would stop me to like ask me questions about her business. And when I'm in like work mode and I'm focused and my kids are not in the house and I'm like, laser beamed on that computer and what I have to get done, it was really, really distracting to get, just random questions here and there about something that I wasn't working on. So we had to have, a conversation about it. Like, hey, when I'm working, like unless it's a question about a client or, something specific, which you can also text me and I can quickly answer, all of the personal questions, about your business, I'm here to help. But those have to wait for a specific time that is preset once a week. And so save all those for one point of time. And she, scheduled the time to talk to Josh and got all of her questions answered from him. And so I think, like I said, like that's a great communication thing. Like I could have let that eat at me and bother me and all of that. But Josh was wise enough to say like, hey, this is a question. These are questions that need to be reserved for one time a week instead of interrupting all day. So, like I said, I think it's just wisdom and just knowing, when to ask questions and when to reserve it for later times. And then also as the business owner or as the person who's doing the delegating, to be wise enough to approach the person who's working for you and say like, hey, let's schedule a time for this. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your concerns, but like, let's do it at this time. And this is, and this over here is what's acceptable for, interrupting me with.
Yes. Perfect. I love that, Kariss. Seriously, that's going to help so many people that
good
working together as a team or as a duo, just because I've seen it time and time again with people that I coach, with my own business. Like if you're constantly interrupted, you will be multitasking all day long versus like
absolutely
beelined into whatever project, and you will be more efficient if you're able to have your blinders on and like not dealing with something else versus that one task and project. That goes back to your guys' get it done mentality. Like you got to get it done. So we need to like just be focusing on that. Love it. Love it. Okay. So with guest episodes, I love you guys teaching and really just educating our listeners on the Legal Page podcast. But I also, of course, like to bring in a legal twist to everything. And I find it really interesting for people to hear what other businesses have found on their business journey as some legal lessons. So if you guys wouldn't mind talking, I think we came up with like 2 really good ones for your guys' business and how that has helped you and shaped you as more legal protected business owners. If you could talk about those 2, I would be really interested in hearing them.
Yeah. So when it comes down to our legal lessons, one lesson that we have learned is having a good contract that is clear is vital, only because that gives us the confidence and the strength to operate and not get taken advantage of from either potential clients or clients who may not be satisfied, right? So we've had to protect ourselves, I should say, from clients who think that it's okay to operate outside of the agreed upon terms. But because our contract, or we've, been diligent enough to have our contract seen by multiple attorneys and lawyers just to make sure that, the way we're operating business, because I will say as your business grows, more things are at stake. You want to make sure you're protecting your assets and your business and everybody, who's operating within it. But because we've had very clear contracts, we've been able to stand up against people who, threaten either to take us to court or threaten to take legal action. But because we know we've done the due diligence of making sure our contract is pretty solid, those threats don't frighten us. They're nothing but threats for now. So, yeah.
No, I love it. You're like preaching everything I preach right now. But Kariss, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, too, in the beginning, our contract was not, as well defined and as perfected as it is now. And I think, when you're in the beginning, it's okay to, find a contract online or whatever you need to do when you don't have the funds to approach a lawyer or, all of that to have this perfectly laid out contract. But what we did was anytime we encountered anything, we added it to the contract. Even just small things that we realized as we were working and as we were kind of ankles deep in the business, that we realized, we would add it to the contract. And so the contract for us right now is very, very tailored to the experiences that we've had, the clients who we've seen, even photographers who we've spoken with. And then, as we developed and grew, like Josh said, we were able to, consult with lawyers and all of that just to make sure that our contract is, really perfected and really catered to us. But in the meantime, it was very much so almost pieced together, but in the best way possible, in the way that best suited us and our clientele in the experiences that we had had.
Well, you two are now my favorite people to talk about contracts. But I love it because, like, Kariss, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, start at least with getting like some type of legitimate contract when you're first starting out. Like, and I always, when I'm talking about this with my legal clients or I'm educating at a conference, or I'm podcasting, anything like that, I always say, like, go to a reputable online source and get a template contract. I would prefer you go to an attorney who's selling them. I've heard like photographers sell them and business coaches sell them, and like, that's not an attorney. So like, get some type of really legit contract that's very specific to your type of business and isn't one of those like general contracts that probably have a lot of clauses that have nothing to do with your business. Go get a template contract, and then I call it the ever-evolving document. And you guys really touched on that, and you kept, bringing that home.
You have to, yeah.
You have to. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make in the industry is that they know that they need to add something to their contract that had to do with 5 situations that occurred last wedding season. And they wish they would have had that a little more clear and concise and like laid out in their contract, is they just like kind of shove it under the rug until another day. And they don't like to really confront that. And then what ends up happening is they will get into a situation where it wasn't as easy to resolve as, say, last wedding season. And I love what you guys do is like every single time something happened, you learn from it and you add it to your contract. And now your guys' contract, and we were talking about this over dinner at the conference that we met at, is like, it's so rock solid that the biggest takeaway I had from you guys is, I'll never forget you guys telling me this. You were like, when we had this big like legal situation with a client, we were like, go ahead, take us to court. Like, because you felt so, it wasn't like a scary thing. Josh, you really said that. You're like, I feel so good about my contract that I would be able to stand up with my contract any day of the week, because I believe that we have done our due diligence and been proactive at the beginning in making sure that our contract covers our butts. So
absolutely,
I love that. So you guys, just as a recap here, I think these legal lessons, really contract lessons, are so key that Josh and Kariss have talked about, is like, get some type of legitimate contract in place to start. Obviously, don't like start working with clients until you have a contract. Get it from a reputable source, and then really see that as an ever-evolving document, because you don't just want to like keep what you have for years and years and years. Like it needs to change. It needs to adapt to your business. Things are going to happen, and you want to continually add certain clauses, beef up certain clauses to your contract that have to do with your business and your lifestyle and things that occur that you just really need to ensure you're protected from. And then at the end of the day, kind of the wrap up here is, you will feel so good about where you stand with your contract. You're going to feel protected and legit. You guys are going to sleep better at night, so on and so forth. So thanks for adding that little legal insight into today's episode, you guys.
Absolutely. And if anybody is ever, if you're not on the fence already about how important contracts are, I will drop this little nugget, just one story. Sorry, Paige.
No, go ahead.
Kariss, I don't know if you remember, but when we had the opportunity to work with Diane Valentine for Ray J's and Princess's wedding, the contract that we sent over to her. Now, if you're not familiar with Diane Valentine, she is the wedding planner to superstars. She now has, her own TV show and all of those things. So she is used to these $1 million wedding, these huge events, right? And so I remember one of the first contracts we sent to her, she literally ripped it to shreds. We got it back and it was red all over it. And that was a huge wake up call, because when you start leveling up the events and weddings that you do, they're not, they're really looking at these contracts. They're not just signing them off and, turning the other cheek, because there's more at stake. So what I will advise any photographer is, if you want to level up, if you want to be prepared to shoot these huge weddings and events, you have to make sure first your contract is right. And because that is part of your brand, right? So if you send them a rinky-dink contract, they're going to say, oh, this person, he doesn't do this. He's not used to that, or she doesn't shoot these caliber type of weddings. But if you present that person with the proper contract, you will be light years ahead of the next photographer who doesn't have that type of experience or the wisdom, to present a contract of the caliber of the event they're shooting is. So
I just want to hug you right now, because literally, I think that this is a pivotal thing that people who are, leveling up their businesses really, really need to ensure that they're doing, is making sure their contract has the exact type of professionalism that they are trying to present to every single one of their clients. And, it's not as shiny as all of these other business things that we learn about and are educating ourselves about every day, and how we're emailing and how we're doing pricing guides and PDFs and all of these things are cute and shiny. But the matter of the fact is, your contract actually has so much weight of professionalism to your clients.
Absolutely.
And so when you're leveling up, that's the perfect story, Josh, is because the clients that I'm working with actually right now are pretty much in that category. So I do custom contract reviews for clients, and it's mostly for these middle tier, people in business that started somewhere and now they're completely upscaling and having bigger clientele, and they need to make sure that their contract is so legit. And so having an attorney look over it is literally should be your first next step.
Absolutely. So that's why I said that. So we're forever grateful for, Diane, giving us that tip, looking over it. So
yeah, seriously, power to you, Ms. Valentine. I love her. She's wonderful. And that's so cool that you guys got to work with her. Okay, so we could go on and talk about all kinds of things. Hopefully we have lots of good questions coming in from our listeners. We'll shoot them your guys' way. So where can they find you guys on all of the social media and internet platforms for them to ask you guys all kinds of questions?
Yeah, so we are Pharris Photos everywhere. So Pharris is spelled Pharris Photos, and that's at Pharris Photos on Instagram, /Pharris Photos on Facebook, PharrisPhotos.com, all of the above.
Perfect. So easy. So everyone, once again, that's Pharris Photos. You can find them everywhere. Thank you so much, Josh and Kariss, for coming on today's episode. It was a joy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Page podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.